You would be quite literally insane if you believe that the elites are not currently trafficking children. I said what I said. You would be insane if that's what you thought. If you thought that they just magically stopped after the Epstein Islands are done and over. They're not doing it anymore. Okay. I used to believe that I wasn't much of a conspiracy theorist. You know, I used to be like, yeah, there's some bad apples in the government, but everyone's pretty fine. I believed in the Epstein incident since I was young, but my brain could not quite comprehend quite past that until, the most recent 3.5 document release. And I was like, oh, at the end of the day, people are just there for their money. They don't really care about us. Hi, my name is Melanie Tree. I am a human trafficking advocate. That means I fight against human trafficking literally every single day by spreading awareness. And I just want to further clarify that human trafficking happens more online than it does with this creepy white van that's going to come and abduct children off the streets. I just want to further clarify because a lot of survivors think this kind of rhetoric is very harmful, and I would agree with that 100%. I would agree that if people just believe that it's just these creepy traffickers are abducting children off the streets and that's all human trafficking is. Human trafficking happens more prominently online than it happens with that narrative. And we need to be talking more about that. We need to be talking about how we need to monitor children's safety. We need to be more conscientious of who that we let in because people are more likely to be trafficked and harmed and essayed through people that they know, through family members, through family friends, through school teachers, through police officers, like literally anyone that you know. You're more likely to be harmed by someone like that, and you can be groomed online to be taken and then being brought back home by 5 p.m. for dinner and no one will know. I've heard survivor stories several times. That does happen. It can be groomed by someone that they know, a family friend, a lover, a boyfriend, online or in person, and then be taken with them and then being brought back by dinner and they pretend everything is fine. They don't tell anyone because they're ashamed. And it is quite literally heartbreaking. So I want to further clarify that. Now, what I also think is that, yeah, something's happening in the upper realm, and I think that needs to be brought forward because people seem to be caught in the past about what's going on in the past and what happened in the document release and how nothing's happening, which we need to be talking about that, but we also need to be talking about what's happening right now. And I highly doubt that they ever stopped it because predators are repeat offenders. We know that to be statistically accurate. So these men and these women won't just stop because of the release. We need to be monitoring where they're going, their private planes, where they're documented to be at, like which cities, which countries, where they're going, we need to know, and then look at missing children. Kind of crazy. I know that's a kind of crazy thought, but I know this to be true, and we don't need to be monitoring what the American government are doing. We also need to be monitoring what the European government have been doing because there's a survivor called Anika Lucas. You guys all need to look into her story. She was trafficked through the European government, through elites, through, what do you guys call them? Prime ministers, through royalty and European, and it was her mother that sold her. Her mother cared more about the money than the harm that she caused her child. We also need to be pointing that out because children could be harmed, but they're not reported missing, so the police officers don't even know to be looking for them because their parents could be trafficking them out, and that's all the child knows because there have been children that have been trafficked since birth. And we also need to point out Kaya Ray's story. So if you guys don't know her, look her up because she was trafficked through the military, the United States military. Can't make this shit up. Can't make it up. Not making it up. Look up her story. She was trafficked through the military, and this is a way that they can create better form of human beings to experiment on what the mind power can do. And through military, the best form of creating military personages to fight our wars. That crap really woke me up because I believe survivors. I believe human trafficking survivors, and I didn't really believe that the government could do something like that. And then I listened to her story and I was like, oh yeah. So instead of just talking about that in, the Virginian Islands, the Epstein Islands, islands. There are other known human trafficking islands. And you may know me because I talked about the Ohio human trafficking island, the Rattlesnake Island, which is also owned by very rich people. And of course, this is the Rattlesnake Islands, I'll allege, so I don't get sued. And don't come for me. It's owned by very rich people, and it's quite suspicious because you have to have a lot of money in order to go in. And you also have to be recognized as someone deemed safe by other two people that can nominate you into, enjoying yourself at this island. And people that live around there. And this is in the Lake Erie Island in Ohio. And a lot of people in Ohio don't even know about this, and some that do and think that this is completely insane and have visited this island and deem it safe. And my counter argument to that is that there's a lot of people that did not know there was a predator that was their friend and was their family member, and they thought they were safe and they were never harmed. And then the news comes out and they're like, I had no clue that person was a murderer. I had no clue that person harmed children. I had no clue that person harmed women. Happens all the time. So if you don't know what you're looking for, you might miss it. That's quite honest truth. And then people that live around there have stated that there's a lot of people with clickers around the island, and they find that incredibly suspicious because these aren't just average clickers, these are like big clickers. Yeah. And there was an article about a journalist that was asking people that have worked on this island, and I've also met people that have worked on this island since I posted that video. They say, yeah, I think something is going on, and they say that there's a lot of women, foreign women that work here, and they find it incredibly suspicious. Russian women and Eastern European women that work there. And this does happen quite often because there are organizations and people that say, hey, I can take your family member and your loved one to the States, and I can take care of them and make sure they're safe, and they can start off, and then they can send you money so then you can come. And this also happens with the border situation between Mexico and the United States, and people are brought over through coyotes. And these coyotes, they promise people that they'll bring their loved ones, that they saved a lot of money up to pay these coyotes, and they can bring them over the United States safely. And then sometimes they never hear about their loved one ever again, and it's not like they can call up the police and be like, hey, I did something illegal and my loved one is missing. And also people that have done that, the police don't take it seriously in some instances. And sometimes there are vulnerable populations that have been brought here illegally, or whatever your political position has been, they have been brought over and they don't have the proper documents, and then their family member goes missing, and they can't just go to the police and be like, hey, you're gonna look into me and realize, oh, I am not a legal citizen of the United States or whatever country you are in, but I have a family member that's missing, and I want you to overlook that and find my family member. That's realistically not gonna happen. They're gonna be sent back to the country that they were born in. It's rather heartbreaking. There are tons of stories about that alone, thousands of stories, and it's hard to hear them, but it's incredibly vital. But there are also known islands, incredibly known islands, that harmed children, and we don't talk about them enough, so I'm going to be talking about them. So a lot of people were asking me to look into islands with animal names, and I did. I started looking at them, and there are islands that I've noticed that are all over the world and are human trafficking islands. And I also want to preface that America is the biggest buyer of child sexual abuse material, and also is the biggest buyer of human trafficking. So I also want to preface that it's not just like some foreign country's problems, it's a world problem, and America is the biggest buyer of it. So I want to talk about Bird Island, which is in South Africa area, and this was basically in the mid 1980s, so a bit farther back, but not that far. And these people prominent people with connections, they would take advantage of children that are of minorities and are not specifically cared for enough, and the family doesn't have a whole lot of money, and they would take these vulnerable children are also all incredibly vulnerable, but children that are even more vulnerable with their economic status, take these children to an island to be sexually abused by prominent figures. And this includes ministers, this includes politicians, this includes just mayors, this includes a lot of people. But guess what? Soon as this incident started gaining attention, it got shut down. You're not allowed to post about it anymore. They took these survivor stories off the shelves because they wrote books about them, and you can't really find them anymore because they got in trouble because they were lying. How many people said that about that? Epstein Island. And I highly encourage you look into the Bird Island. And then we have most notably the North Fox Island in Michigan, USA, where just like Bird Island, there were prominent individuals that were taking advantage of kids that did not have a lot of economic status and vulnerable children. All children are vulnerable, but these incredibly vulnerable boys, they would bring them to North Fox Island as a guise of, yeah, we're just taking care of the kids. It's like Camp Hideaway where they can learn, and it's just like campground. Now, this was in the 1970s, 1976 more specifically, when they got caught, where they were making child sexual abuse material, and they were trafficking them, and it was underneath the Brother Paul's Children's Mission, where this man guised himself as like a religious leader where he can take children to a campground and they can be safe. And this ring was run by a millionaire, Francis Sheldon. And Francis Sheldon has inspired several evil men that are involved in the foster system that trafficked children and harmed children and created child sexual abuse material because of this. Because of this incident, there has been other predators who followed his guide to how to create a funnel like this. Started all elite human trafficking islands, just like the infamous Jeffrey Island. So I did some digging about known PDF file islands, and I found something very interesting. I looked into Deer Island, which is owned by the Skull and Bone, and Great St. James, which is a smaller version of Little St. James, owned by Epstein. And there are other islands that I'm looking into, but it seemed that everything took me back to Fox Island, which may be interesting because I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with North Fox Island. It was ran by a man named Sheldon, and Sheldon found lots of boys that were underprivileged, and he worked at a lot of Catholic schools. And just like Lane Maxwell, he reached a plea deal if he named the 600 men that were customers of this island. And as far as I'm concerned, we still do not know those 600 men. But amongst that, he released his blueprint of how he found these men and how he created the island. And this blueprint inspired another sick individual that you guys may not have heard of. Meet Reverend Claudius Vermeil Jr. This man purchased a property in Pall Mall, Tennessee, which was a farm. He gained a lot of respect in his community because he was a World War I hero. So they opened up an orphanage for misplaced boys. This property was funded by a lot of sponsors. And because he was inspired by the blueprint provided by Sheldon, he produced thousands of child abuse material, specifically for the sponsors. The youngest is believed to be at least 11 years old. And because he was inspired by Sheldon, he provided the most perfect recipe for all of his wonderful sponsors. As promised, I will be diving more into islands, but I found this incredibly interesting because there is a literal blueprint for PDF files to abuse children on an island or an orphanage. But like the Epstein Island, the law enforcement knew had good evidence about people that were buying these children and making this material, but hardly any of them got prosecuted. So there could be some that are still today that were involved in this and they haven't been charged with anything. But I also want to point out that there's a lot of billionaires and millionaires that were named and listed, and which of course doesn't prove that they're guilty because they're listed in the you-know-what files, but they also own islands as well, and I have been covering them. That is Larry Ellison, and he owns an island, or 98% of an island in Hawaii. There's Richard Branson, who owns 2 islands, and who owns Necker Island in the British Virgin Islands. There's David Copperfield, who owns Musha Cay in the Bahamas. There is Aga Khan, who owns Bell Island in the Bahamas. There's Larry Page, who owns multiple islands in the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is where Epstein ran his thing, and also one in Fiji. There is Steve Case, who owns 57 acres in Hawaii, and there has been a TikTok creator who has reached out to me that he's been calling all this out, and then the government's been after him since, in Hawaii. And there's Mark Zuckerberg. He owns a lot of land in Hawaii and also a compound in Hawaii. There's Michael Dell, who owns 500 acres in Hawaii. There is Red Emerson, who owns 2.44 million acres of land in America. What are you gonna do with all that land? There is John Malone, who owns 2.2 million acres of land in America. And there's also Ted Turner, who owns 2 million acres of land in America. There is Leon Black, who paid $110 million for advice to Jeffrey. Don't know why you need to pay so much for advice from that man. He owns 90 to 100 acres, which we don't exactly know how much, of land in New York, and he also owns a townhouse in London. So yeah, this video may get taken down, but I'm going to be here and I'm going to be posting weekly, and we're going to be going into deeper dives, but this is kind of an introduction to everything that is going on and in Ohio and what's going on with these millionaires and billionaires that own all these islands. And I have also created a lot of short form videos about these millionaires and billionaires that own these islands, and especially highlighted a lot of them that are incredibly suspicious. So follow along and comment down and like and boost this video if you are also curious, because I think we all should be curious and hold these creepy predators accountable.